Hello again, my name is Steve Hillis, and we're going to pick up right where we left off. We've been talking about many of the struggles that younger Americans have been having over the last several years. And up to this point, we've talked a lot about income statistics and so forth. Now we're going to look at more indirect indicators and things that a lot of times young kids may be more interested about because they can see how it directly affects their lives. Here we're looking at student loan default rates, how they've been rising. Student loan defaults began rising actually before the Great Recession. We see an upward trend since at least 2005. And unfortunately, that continues apace. A lot of young people are running up more and more debt as they go to college. And frankly, the costs of college are rising too. And to make matters worse, when kids are graduating from college, a lot of them are struggling to get jobs. Many of them are unemployed, or they wind up taking jobs that they're overqualified for, jobs that pay less than they originally anticipated or hoped. Or they're working part-time, maybe working jobs that don't even require a college education traditionally. The result is, well, more and more kids are struggling to pay their college loans that get bigger and bigger every year. And actually, if we looked at more recent data, unfortunately, we'd see that default rates have continued to increase over the last few years. So this diagram actually isn't painting as negative a picture as maybe it is in reality. In other words, things are maybe a little worse than that picture makes it look like. Now, I mentioned the job front. Let's look a little bit at job additions since the end of the Great Recession. We've been undergoing what many people believe to be a recovery. Now, granted, the recovery in the labor market has been painfully slow, very sluggish job creation. But let's look at who is taking these new jobs in terms of the age groups. Here we're looking at average increases in jobs over the last several years, broken down month by month. And it's also broken down by age groups. For older Americans, 55 to 69, well, it's been a good situation. Actually, before getting to them, one quick aside. We have a line here in the middle that's probably a little difficult for you to see. But everything above that line is showing positive jobs created. So, for these light gray bars representing jobs taken by people 55 to 69, there's been a lot of net jobs created. Now, of course, some older and older middle-aged Americans have lost their jobs during this period, but there were more gains than losses. And that's what these gray bars above this little line are showing. Lots of the new jobs are going to older Americans. Now, to some degree, some younger Americans are gaining new jobs. And we see that when we look at net gains by those 20 to 24. We do see that lots of little dark portions of these bars showing jobs going to them. On net, they're gaining more new jobs than they're losing. So there is some positive job creation and so forth. But let's put this in perspective. Even for those 20 to 24, this is just ridiculously slow. If job creation in general is slow and sluggish, job creation for young Americans is almost glacial. It's just a little bit of job creation. On the other hand, for those 25 to 54, these gray, slightly lighter gray portions of the bar, they're below the line. Negative job creation, net job losses. And that means that, frankly, for a lot of young adults and young middle-aged people, they're basically falling farther behind, losing jobs. And the situation is actually worse for those who are young kids, 16 to 19 years old, and that's these lighter colored bars way down here. Lots of job losses for younger kids, which doesn't just mean losing the opportunity to raise money for summer camp or money to buy a bike. It means not having money to help pay for college, or for that matter, to gain a needed job experience to help get jobs later on, even if you don't go to college. Bottom line is, if you look at a lot of younger Americans, especially our youngest Americans in terms of workers, the recovery has been, well, anything but a recovery. And even for young adults, 20 to 24, the situation has not been particularly good for them. The group that's really done well during the recovery from the Great Recession have been older Americans. Now here we're looking at driver's licenses, or to be more specific, we're looking at what percentage of different age groups are licensed drivers. Along the bottom axis, we're looking at age groups, 16, 17, 18, 19. And then here we see larger groupings, larger ranges, 20 to 24, 25 to 29, all the way to 65, 69, 70. Older Americans, younger Americans. So we get to see what percentage of different age groups have driver's licenses. We're also looking at data from two different time periods. These lighter gray portions of the bar, the left-hand side, you'll see these lighter gray portions of each pair. Those are showing data from 1983. Fast forward 25 years to 2008. That's where the right-hand bar, the darker bar in each pair, shows data. Again, lighter portions on the left show data from 1983. Darker portions of the bars on the right in each pair show data from 2008. That allows us not only to look at how driver's licenses are distributed across different age groups, but also to see how that distribution is changing over time. Let's start out way back in 1983, kind of focus on the left-hand portion of each set of bars. Younger kids back in '83 were much less likely to have driver's license than younger adults and middle-aged and even quite a few older people. Driver's licenses peaked out in midlife, and then a lot of older people began to either lose their driver's licenses or voluntarily quit driving, either by choice or by being kind of forced into it. A lot of older people stopped driving. Now, fast forward to 2008. Look what's happened to younger people with driver's licenses. Younger kids especially are driving less and are less likely over time to have driver's licenses. In fact, that's true for pretty much everyone up until you get to 40 or 44 years old, in that age range. For younger adults, even into the mid to late 30s, fewer and fewer of them as a group are licensed drivers by 2008. And that becomes even more clear when you look at our youngest drivers who are still in their teens or early 20s. Look, when I was a kid, driving a car was a big deal. It was something that kids probably dreamed of. It was part of the American dream. It was part of the right of growing up, becoming a man or becoming a woman, gaining independence. We wrote songs about it. Hell, it was part of being a kid and part of becoming a man. Part of becoming an adult was getting that driver's license. Well, for a whole variety of reasons, younger kids and younger adults are less and less likely to drive. And once again, I'll point out that this trend has continued even today. Now, there's been a change at the other end of the distribution as well. More and more older adults, including senior citizens, are continuing to drive, and you can clearly see that with people in their 60s up to 70 here. The dark bars on the right are so much higher, obviously, than the lighter colored gray bars in the left. In other words, over time, from 1983 to 2008, more and more senior citizens are driving, holding on to their licenses. The exact opposite of what's happening with young kids. And part of that, frankly, is that younger kids or their parents who might be giving them cars or sending them to driver's ed, younger kids and younger adults may be less able to afford to drive. Or they simply may be less interested in getting a driver's license because they know they can't afford to pay for it. Now, undoubtedly, there's other factors involved in younger people being less likely to drive, but undoubtedly, economics is playing a role. Here we're looking at yet another indirect indicator of some problems that young people are having. Here we're looking at the number, at 25 to 34-year-olds living with their parents. Here we're looking at the raw numbers, that's these bars here, and we're also looking at the percentages, that's this line running through here. Both indicators are showing more or less the same trend. Back during the 1980s, both the number and percentage of younger adults all the way up to people in their mid-30s who were living back with their parents did increase for a while. But then it peaked out in the early 90s, kind of stabilized and began to decline. More and more young adults kind of moved out from mom and dad's house and began to live by themselves or live with another person, go to college, whatever. They weren't living in the basement, they weren't living in their old bedroom they grew up in. By the time you get into the early 2000s, it kind of hits a minimum. But then, even before the Great Recession, you see it start to climb up, and by the time you hit the Great Recession, you're in the years 2008, 9, 10, 11, it shoots up very, very quickly and hits a peak well above what it had been back during the 1980s. A lot of young adults and a lot of young kids, for that matter, not shown in this graph, are living with mom and dad longer, and that's extending well into what has traditionally been adulthood. More and more stay-home kids, more and more stay-home adults, young adults, suggesting, once again, a lot of people are struggling to pay their rent, they're not getting married, they're choosing or being forced not to have kids, and so forth. Do millennials stand a chance in the real world? Well, I don't know. Frankly, a lot of young kids are struggling, and a lot of economists and sociologists are becoming increasingly concerned about the future solvency, the ability of young people to save and to invest, to accumulate wealth. Frankly, historically, what we've seen is that people that grow up and are first getting jobs during really bad economic times, a lot of times suffer mightily in terms of their long-term wealth, their long-term savings, their career trajectories, their incomes, and so forth. A lot of times people that come out during the bad portions of an economic cycle really struggle for years, if not decades. And that, frankly, is something that young people are all too aware of. Here we're looking at an article that talks about millennials, the most stressed out generation in America. Lots of young kids and lots of young adults are really worried about their careers, worried about getting a job, worried about where they're going to live, worried about how they're going to pay off their student debt. On the other hand, young Americans, surprisingly, are the most optimistic about basically the economy turning around, about America recovering, about them getting better jobs, and so forth. If you ask middle-aged or older Americans, many of them are much more pessimistic about the economic futures, both in the short run and in the long run, compared to younger people. So if you look at subjective measures of how people think things are going to work out, young people are both stressed out in one respect, but at the same time, continue to be optimistic about the future offering promise for them. We'll see if the millennials stand a chance in the real world. I wish them love, peace. Thank you very much.